Oh, we can't hear you. You got the mute on.
How you hear me now?
Hi. Hello?
Okay. How is it? How is everyone doing?
We're good. We missed you, Rabbi.
I miss you guys too. Okay. We have a lot
We're
of
glad you're
exciting
safe.
stuff here from the Holy Land. A lot of exciting stuff. So I'm going to talk about what's going on, give some perspective, and we're going to talk about it in terms of Torah portion, how we see the world's events unfolding. I want to say some things that are obvious to those here, but not obvious to the world. I want just to imagine a second, take Israel out of the calculation. Imagine any country in the world where there would be a group of people neighboring that country who would say, our mission is to kill every one of you in this country. Okay. And then they would start to do it for years. They would do it, make plans, take billions of dollars and create an infrastructure to kill. Now, if they would start the war with any country in the world, we all know how that country would react. It's just normal. That's what war is, not a very bad thing. But if the country had the ability to go and to decimate the other country in a war to protect themselves, everyone would do it. It's called self-defense. They even have that concept in America, although it's become a little bit skewed. But everyone knows this idea. So the question I want to understand today is, why is a large percentage of the world telling the Jews that they should not do what everyone knows that they would do? What's the rationale for this? Okay, I want to explain it, and I want to explain it from 4 different perspectives. I want to explain it from the perspective of the observer, who is anti-Israel, the observer who is pro-Israel, from the Arab perspective, and the Jewish perspective. I want to explain from all 4 to understand what's happening in this world with the protests, and these guys saying this, these guys saying that. What are the Arabs thinking, and what should the Jews be doing and saying and thinking? That's what I want to discuss today. So first, I want to ask you. Someone asked me this question. That I don't know if they're here today. I don't know if Naomi is here, but she asked me this question last week. It was a very good question. She said to me, were the people in the past, in early biblical times, you read the story of the flood, and we had the story also in Parshas Noach in the portion of Noach about the generation of the dispersion, Dora Flaga. People built a tower up to the sky. Their goal was to fight God, so to speak. I can't get into how they were going to do that now, but they had certain spiritual knowledge they were going to do, and they wanted to try to make everyone believe that they had power and they were not subservient to God. They were fighting God. And that's when the world became split into 70 nations. And so we had that generation, really the 3rd generation from Adam was already the generation of Enosh. And it says in the Torah text that they started worshiping idols. It says, and they started calling things God, right? This pantheistic type of view of like, this is God, that's God. And how did it start? They said, listen, the son is a servant of God. If the servant of the king came to you, you would honor the servant of the king, not honor the son also. And soon in time, they started doing idol worship. And then you had the generation of the flood, steeped in illicit relations. And then you had this last generation, when we talked about the generation of the separation, when they built the Tower of Babel, that they wanted to separate the spiritual from the physical, a form of murder, really. And then in this week's portion, we have the generation of Sodom, which was like a combination of all the bad 3. So if I said to you, who is worse, people in the olden days, the old time sinners, or the new time sinners, who would you say? But I guess the answer would be in a certain way the old time, maybe. But I want to explain to you, it's a little bit more complicated than that. The reason why the old-time sinners were powerful is because, first of all, they weren't as stupid as people are today. They didn't have Facebook then. So they weren't like, all just repeating slogans. They actually knew a lot of things about evil, and they were absorbed into it. But the bottom line was the world was young. In the early years, the first 2,000 years of creation, God made it that the people in the world had tremendous insight. There was a lot of blessing in the world. In the story of Noah, it says there was tremendous blessing in the world, and that people used it to go and to fight against God. And if you look, even you see people had different lifespans. The world was a very, very different place. There was a lot of both physical and spiritual power that happened in the early years. And the reason why that was because God gave a 2,000-year time frame that anyone that wanted to find God could find God. And therefore, God created the world that he was very accessible for 2,000 years. There wasn't Abraham, there wasn't Jewish people, Jewish nation. Everyone wanted to be Jewish, would be Jewish. It was a universal society. Anyone could find God. And they had a connection back to Adam. They had prophets, they had Noah to talk to. So the people, the world had this large possibilities, and people who were evil had no barriers. They would just do the wildest things. And that's why the early generations, when they were bad, they were really bad, right? In the generation of Noah, they decided they were going to do every kind of illicit act. And the generation of the Tower of Babel, they had spiritual powers that were going to fight God. The world did change at a certain point, and there's certain times where it changed. One change started after the flood, when they started making some boundaries, as I spoke about 2 weeks ago, for themselves. It says the nations of the world after the flood started limiting their illicit relations because they knew things went awry and they didn't want another flood. And people started acting with certain boundaries, which they didn't have because they were just like, whoa, God put them in the world and made things accessible for them, and especially accessible was God accessible to them. And they used the powers and the things that were available to them to the opposite reason. Okay. Then the nation started to become more circumscribed and wanted to create boundaries because they saw what happened with no boundaries. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago. Now, that led it to the point, really, where there is responses in Jewish writing about the generations of the nations of the world, because if you go back, couple thousand years ago, these guys were barbarians. They were literally barbarians. The Talmud talks about like what was going on. And the Talmud was telling you, Rabbi Akiva says he saw this case. There was a non-Jew who had relations with the animal, then he slaughtered it, he ate it, and there were people who were barbarians. So people started at certain points making boundaries for themselves to the point where the nations of the world became more refined and more cultured. Now, does refined and cultured mean good? Not necessarily. The Nazis were extremely cultured. So people made boundaries and they had certain protocols. If you go back into the 1950s, we talked about it before, the show I Love Lucy, you had to have always a foot on the ground. You couldn't be on a bed. You had to have a foot on the floor. Society just 50, 60 years ago was like, you couldn't do things that were accepted in society. People were hypocrites. They might have done a lot of nasty things that they were doing, but what was accepted in society started to become within certain boundaries. Okay. And ladies and gentlemen, what's happened in the past number of years is, as I mentioned a few weeks ago, the boundaries have been taken down again. And that's why you see a lot of crazy stuff. So the answer to the question were people in the old days worse than they are today? I don't know. I know that in the olden days, in the beginning of time, the world was in a situation that people had no boundaries. They started putting cultural restraints and politeness, but politeness could be very external. And even that, if you go watch, I mean, I wouldn't tell you to go watch anything on television today, but if a person would ever watch something, like just it's shocking. You see a music video from the crazy Beatles in in 65 with their mop tops and they're shaking their heads like, oh, it was terrible. And like you look at something, tell you like, what happened? Where did the world go? So now you have a real situation where I hate to say it, but we're almost back to the olden days when the boundaries have been taken down. Okay, that's the first piece I want to give you, and you're going to see how I'm tying this in with the history of the world, what's happened. Let's go back to the olden days when the world was wild and willy and doing crazy things. Now, when that happened, God put a 2,000-year period of time. And that's what I mentioned too many times, the teaching that says the first 2,000 years was called Tohu, was called a void, because God did not give the Torah yet. He let the world be open to find him. Nobody did. People became worse and worse and worse. Then, close to the 2,000 years, in the year 1948 to the creation of the world, was born Abraham, Avraham, and then his wife Sarah. And they started the God revolution. They started dealing with a world that was crazy. Okay, he lived in the time of the generation of the Tower of Babel. It means that in his generation, the people were trying to build a tower to fight God. Abraham comes with this God revolution. Now, the God revolution is fascinating because it has certain components as its fundamental components. One is there is one God. There's one God who is omnipotent and beneficent, all good and all powerful. Now, that changes the whole playing field, because before that, everyone has their idols, their power. It's all about power and control. Comes along this person who opens his tent on four sides and says, please come in. I want to give you, I want to share with you, I want to give to you. People were, their heads were exploding. They're like, why would you give me anything? Why would you do that? And say, because how am I alone? Because God gave to us. God gave to me, and he created me. Okay, and he gave me freely, and I am doing his process. Now, that really blew everyone's brain, because what happened was, so God is giving to us. He loves us. He created us. And this is this God revolution that Abraham is starting. Now, what was the response of the world? The response of the world was, kill Abraham. That was the response of the world. Okay? That was the response of the world. The Torah, when we start in last week's portion, it starts telling about Abraham when God told him to leave his hometown. But there are stories of what happened to Abraham before that the Torah does not discuss. They are brought down to us in our oral tradition in the Midrashim. And the famous story there, when Abraham was very young, his father was an idolater. His name was Terach. And he was an officer in the king's court, a very high officer in King Nimrod's court. And Abraham was a kid, and he was thinking, he says, you're worshiping idols. That makes no sense. And the famous story there in the Midrash, that his father, Terach, had an idol shop. And he told Abraham, he said, listen, when people come in, I have to go away, sell idols. People came in, and this one guy came in, he said to him, a guy said, I want to buy that idol. And then Abraham said, well, ask me, how old are you? I said, I'm 50. He said, 50? My father made this idol yesterday. Why do you want to buy an idol? It's one day old. You're a 50-year-old man. And he was convincing everyone not to buy the idols. Then the famous story, he smashes the idols, Abraham. He leaves the big idol. He takes an axe. He puts it in the hand of the big idol. His father comes home, and $1 million of merchandise has been destroyed. And he says, what happened? Abraham says, well, I'll tell you what happened. A fight broke out amongst the idols. This one said they were in charge. That in charge. They started fighting. And the big one stood up and smashed them all. The father said, that's crazy. They can't talk. They can't argue. That's right. So why do you worship them? For that, Abraham was taken and turned into the king. The king Nimrod tried to kill him. And this is the first of Abraham's 10 tests. He got thrown into a fire. And this is one of the tremendous miracles that shook the whole world up. He didn't die. And Abraham started actually this God revolution. The people in this place started bringing their children to Abraham and said, teach my kids. I don't know how you did this stuff. It's amazing. He threw you in the fire and somehow you survived. So Abraham said, what about you? You're bringing me your kids. What about you? I said, I'm used to my ways here. I got my TV shows I watch. I got my poker games. I don't know. I can't check my kid. So that's what happened. So Abraham, when he starts this God revolution, the response to the world is to kill him. So much so, I share with you once, he's called Avraham Ivri, Abraham the Hebrew. But the word Ivri has another meaning. The word Ivri means on the other side. It means the whole world is on one side and Abraham's on the other side. Could you imagine that? Could you imagine going to a place and everyone believes something and you come out and you say, you're all wrong? Could you imagine that? Samuel, maybe you can imagine that coming from you told me from from where you came from in the world that you came from. A person comes from another country and the country says there's no God, and you come on and say, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
that's not so easy. And then to fight against the entire world, Abraham fought against the entire world. Now the world, so much so they tried to kill him. They hated Abraham. Now, Abraham starts to get followers. He starts to get people saying, wait a minute, this is beautiful. There's one power source in the world, not multi-power sources that I'm fighting and manipulating. There's one power source, and he's giving and loving and omnipotent and omniscient completely. It's unbelievable. He starts getting followers. And that's the people that Abraham brought into his group, and he started making this revolution. Now, the powers that be did not like this revolution. Okay, it's starting to sound like a conspiracy theory, right? Corona came from a bat. Don't you understand? So they said. So what happened was, so they didn't like this. They didn't like Abraham's revolution. So they hated him. To the point, I want to share with you an amazing thing. If you followed in the Torah portion last week, so it says there was a war of the 4 kings against the 5 kings. It was the First World War. You know that? The reason why Abraham went to fight, it says, one of the commentaries says, because he was so upset that person could go fight a war. He said, I have to stop this. He went out with 318 men to fight against the superpower at the time because he couldn't believe somebody would fight a war against another human being. But that was the First World War. Now, when you read the Torah, it seems it gives you the basic reasons, but I want to tell you the deeper reasons that it says in the mystical writings of what the reason for the war was. And I think I could share this with you because I think you need to know. The real reason for the war, it says, was to get rid of Abraham. Everything else was a political machination. Right? They had this thing, there was a king and he was paying taxes and he stopped paying the taxes and then they rebelled. So they came to fight. That was all the external circumstances, but their real motivation was in the process of the war. When they came to the land of Israel to fight, they wanted to get Abraham, they wanted to kill him. Okay? It's amazing. Because if I ask a historian, why did World War II happen? So a good historian will say, well, it was a Treaty of Versailles. Germany got a bad deal. They were upset and this and that. But then I ask you a question. Why, when Hitler had a choice to help the war effort and send ammunition to the front lines, he rather chose to take the cattle cars and the trains and the trucks and use them to kill Jews? And the answer was because that was his real war. Even though there are other political machinations, but that wasn't the real thing. The real thing was to get Abraham. And the world was really against him. Now, the thing was, he had followers, started to grow. The people were comforted by one thing, it says. It says they were kind of one thing. The anti-Abraham people had one comfort in their mind. And you know what that was? He didn't have any children. And they said he's a sterile mule. So this revolution, don't get too excited. It's going to fade. And that's why when Yitzchak is born, it shakes the whole world up. Because they say, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is not normal. An old man, an old woman having a kid. So this is the underpinnings I need you to understand what's happening today. Okay? So what am I showing you? I'm showing you that what happened is you have a reality where people have their vices, if it's power, if it's pleasure and illicit relations, if it's theft, if it's whatever it is that they want to do that they know is not right, there is one person that stands out as being the antithesis and the thing preventing them from expressing all of their evil intent. And that person was Abraham. And therefore, wanted to kill him. Now, what I want to share with you now is very, very important. And I've been getting this question a lot, especially from, I don't know who's here from my other groups, but in a lot of my other classes. So I have, Jewish students who don't know how to answer people that they thought were their friends. And now they say, whoa, these people are not my friends. They actually want my destruction. So I want to try to explain to you a very deep thing here, what's happening with the observers. We'll get to the Arabs and the Jews in a minute. But the observers are now broken up into two camps. It's two camps. The reason why, I asked in the beginning, why the world, there are people who they know if their country was being attacked by an enemy that says, I am bent on destroying you, they know that they would fight a war with all the casualties of war that would happen, right? Like when the Allies bombed Dresden, they were in a war. And that is what every nation would do. And the people that are condemning Israel, the reason why they are really doing that in a deeper sense is because subconsciously they are aware that these people, however they look, it's confusing. Who's a Jew? What's a Jew? But they understand that these people represent God in the world. These are the chosen people. They have a Torah, they have morality, and they actually do not want them to survive. And that's why I want to tell, whoever's out there, if you have somebody that you're talking to and you're trying to explain the position and you're trying to explain the logic to them, wait a minute, we wouldn't do this in America. in America, if we were bombed by enemies that we were stronger than them, we'd flatten them in a second. You know that. I mean, I grew up in America. I know that. Everyone knows that. That would be the 1, 2, 3. That was not even a question. The people that don't want it is the deeper subconscious reason is because it's the same story as Abraham. The Jews represent something they don't want them to survive. That's why if you tell somebody something and they just were ignorant, they didn't know. I had someone I was talking to, and I just told them some of the basic things. Like, he's like, because you're Gaza occupation. I said, Gaza occupation. We don't Gaza occupation. We kicked ourselves out of Gaza. We don't occupy Gaza. We gave them the land. We kicked the Jews out of our land and gave it to them. They have complete autonomy there, except we're helping them and we give them electricity. For what reason, I don't know. We give them all this stuff, but they have complete autonomy. They got billions of dollars. What they do with the billions of dollars they got, what they did was they built tunnels and prepared this war instead of helping their people. It's amazing. God was a beautiful, beautiful place. It's a beachfront. It's like you have the wrong concept here. It's the most densely populated. No, there's very nice areas in Gaza. It's along the beach. I know my brother used to go there when it was Israel. He used to go every summer. So what happens is that and this is where we have a big demarcation in the nations of the world. Those that are righteous, Hasidi Umas Olam, they intrinsically feel the Jewish people are being attacked, and they should protect themselves. And those who don't, you can't convince them, because it's like trying to convince a Nazi to say, oh, really, you shouldn't be doing this. But you don't understand that's my whole philosophy of life. The people that wanted to kill Abraham, you couldn't have an argument with them and say, it's good, it's not good, because their essence was to fight this. It was seen and experienced as contrary to what their desires were. He wants to bring one God in the world. He wants to change this whole system. I don't want that. So that is really, and that's why it's very important. I mean, yes, to educate if you can. There's some people who just don't know. But there is unfortunately, you're seeing this, a real strong component of those that, and it's a verse in the prophets, and in a few places we learn the verse that those who hate the Jewish people hate Hashem, hate God. And that's why it's like a bizarre thing, I don't know if you guys saw this, but like, you have these signs, queers for Palestine. It's like the funniest thing in the world, because they would kill them in 1 second. Like, how do you get this intersection of support for these terrorists from people that the Gazans, the Hamas would kill in 1 second? Hamas don't have they don't have rights for the LGBT community. So why would they support? Why would they support them? They would kill them. It's the craziest thing in the world. And the deeper answer is because if somebody is against the Jewish people, they understand that the morals the Jewish people have are God-given morals that they may oppose. And so there is a strange intersectionality of these groups that are supporting the Hamas cause, which they have no alignment. The only common alignment is that there's a concept against what the Jewish people represent. Now, that is for the world. Now, I want to speak about the Arab nation here, because it's a very, very different story, the Arab nation. Very, very different story. It's not the same story. And it's unfortunate that we don't have, I sent out, a couple of weeks ago to Rod, the Saudi blogger who said his opinion about the Palestinians, and it was very strong. It was very anti. And he says, as some Arabs honestly say, that the land of Israel is given to the Jews. They know that. They know that. There are Arab scholars who are honest and say, in the Quran they mention Mecca 700 times, Medina 350 times, Jerusalem 0. That's not that they know that. So you have Arab scholars who say that. So what is the Arab issue? What is the Arab issue? And where did this go haywire? So the answer to that also is in the story in the parsha. The Arab story actually is quite different than the story of Esav. Esav, who is the spiritual leader of really Christianity, because Esav is called Esau, the son of Yitzchak, is called Rome, and Rome becomes the Holy Roman Empire, which becomes Christianity, and it has that whole different approach. So it's a very different path than the Yishmaelim have, the Arabs have. The Arabs, their issue, the Christian view, which was Esau, it was that he was going in the opposite direction of Jacob. And that's why they were two opposite things. And that's why the Christian philosophy eventually became that you Jews lost your rights, now we took them. Because it was either or. It was always either Esav or Jacob. That's what we're going to see. Look in the verse in the Torah, you'll see. It says in the text, one is up, one is down. They cannot function together. They're going in opposite directions. And that's why it says when Jerusalem is built, then Rome is not. When Rome is built up, Jerusalem is not, because they go in opposite directions. And that's really what the Christian view of that you were the chosen people, you lost it, and now we are that. It's either wrong. That's not the Yishmael, that's not the Arab story at all. The Arab story was that Yishmael was a son of Abraham, and the question was, who was the primary son? Because Yishmael was older. So Yishmael claimed that he was the main one, and Yitzchak was secondary to him. Okay, and Yishmael was the main, and the Jewish people they could exist, but they could exist subservient to the Arab people, and that really was the opposite of the situation. The situation was that God chose Abraham's son, Yitzchak and Yaakov, and Yishmael was able to go and to connect and to become part of the vision of Abraham through connecting through Yitzchak. And we have a tradition that Yishmael, even though he did a lot of negative things in his life, he actually repented at the end of his life. And we know that because when it came time to bury Abraham, he let Yitzchak go first. And he understood the dynamic and he made peace with it. But that's been the Arab issue for a very long time, which the issue has been that the Arab people say, it's like people don't realize why when people say the Arabs, in Iran, they're saying death to Israel, death to America. They don't realize when they say small Satan and big Satan. So people don't realize that the reason why there is more hatred to the Jews than the Christians is only because the Jews are right now in their backyard. That's really what it is. They actually, really, in a certain place, hate the Christians more than the Jews. The wars with the Christians against the Muslims more than they hated the Jews even. But the Jews are now close by, and therefore some Arabs, like that Saudi blogger, was at peace with the fact this is the land of the Jews. And unfortunately, the Arab nation, now what's happened is that the Palestinian, the Gazans, what they've done is that they brainwash these people with so much hatred that what's happened is right now that they've been indoctrinated to this just culture of hate, and it's rooted in a place of how to relate to the Jewish people and their role, and instead it's just turned into a society of hate. That is the Arab issue. The Arab issue has to be to understand the reality. The reality is the land of Israel is the land that God promised to the Jewish people. If you accept if you're Christian or if you're Muslim, that means you accept what we call the Torah, they call it the old book, whatever. You accept that. That means that you have to understand that God promised this land to the Jews, is for the Jews, promises covenant with the Jews. And the Arab world has to make peace with that, which some of them may do, and that's what we hope. Unfortunately, the people in Gaza don't. Now, what about the Jews? What do the Jews have to do here? What do the Jews have to do? So there's a few things that's happened right now for the Jewish people. Very, very fascinating things. When people call for a ceasefire right now, what is that supposed to do? That's supposed to hurt the Jewish people. You understand that, right? I hope you understand that. We've had bombs going off in our neighborhood. We've had some miracles where a bomb did get through and did land. Many of them are shot down by the Iron Dome, but we had one that did land on the first day of the attacks, did land right next to 4 major synagogues in our neighborhood, with hundreds and hundreds of people were in the synagogue at the time. And miraculously, the bomb did not go off. So what happens is when you stop the pressure on Gaza right now, what you're doing is you're endangering us. Because it's not like they say, oh, ceasefire, good. Let's deal with humanitarian needs. That's not what they say. What they say is, an opportunity to bomb. And so it's very, very dangerous to have any halt in what's going on because it endangers us. But what do the Jews need to do? And this is I want to answer this question in a two-sided thing to understand. What the Jews need to do is keep the Torah and mitzvot. Everything else, we should have a state, we should have a government, and we should try this and that. But what the Jews have to do is when the Jews keep the Torah and mitzvot, God directs the show exactly where it's supposed to be. We understand that the Jews, as I mentioned to Rod a couple of weeks ago, the Jews have to be the internal mechanism in the world, do what is right. And when we do what's right, we do the Torah and mitzvot, then what happens is the structure of the world falls into place. We do not believe that it is really even the Arabs. We don't even believe it's these guys. We don't believe anyone is the one that is our source of our problem. We understand God runs the world and he's asking us to keep the Torah. He puts us through different challenges to bring out his ultimate mission. And the ultimate mission is going to happen by hook or crook. And the more the Jews do the Torah and mitzvot, the smoother it's going to be for all of us. Because what you will understand that when the Jewish people bring out God's mission in the world, as we said many times, the entire world benefits. Time of Solomon, I said to you many times, there was no famines, there was no earthquakes, there was no problem. It was all good because the blessing came down, as it says in the Torah portion. All the nations of the world will be blessed through Abraham and the Jewish people. That's the way the world works. So it's a weird dynamic to feel fighting against because they're fighting and they're hurting themselves. But we understand we have to do what is right, what's spiritually correct. Now, what about physically? What should be the Jewish reaction to these people who say, well, don't go and do what anyone would do is to defend themselves? Well, I said to you before, it's a very strange situation because, first of all, I don't know. Do I think there are innocent civilians in Gaza? Probably some. How many? I don't know. as a problem, if Hamas is democratically elected, that means most of the people, if that's true, it was a real election, that means most of the people support terrorists. That's very serious. That's a major problem. In Jewish law, that's an issue because they are now part of the issue. They're not innocent anymore. Now, are there some that are innocent? Yeah, probably. I don't know, maybe. And this is where we have the misplaced Jewish empathy. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a little embarrassing, but you have some Jews who are calling for a ceasefire. You seen that? Very confusing. People are like, I don't understand. What's going on? So let me explain to you. And I'll try to defend these somewhat crazy Jews. Because in this week's portion, you have one of the strangest things. This portion starts out. Abraham is praying to save Sodom. The Sodom is the worst place in the world. Why is he praying to save them? Just kill them, destroy them. Why is he doing that? We have a principle. It's a verse in the prophets says, "So Oave Hashem sin ura." Those who love Hashem hate evil. They don't say, "It's a terrorist. It's okay." No, a person that's evil. If you don't fight that, you're part of the problem. It's the story of Shaul, king, the great King Saul. He was the greatest of the great. And he was so humble, and he had compassion on the evil Amalekites who were Nazis. He had compassion on them. And the text says, those who are compassionate on cruel people will end up being cruel on compassionate people. And that's what happened to Shaul. He became melancholy, became confused. And he thought people were rebelling against him, and he ended up killing the city. It was a terrible mistake. He thought they were rebelling. They weren't rebelling against him. But once you misplace your ideas, then you end up supporting the wrong side. So what happened? What was Abraham doing? Why was Abraham praying for the evil Sodomites? He should have said, "Get rid of them. They're Nazis." So what Abraham was praying for was not praying for evil. He was praying when he said 50 righteous people or 40 righteous, 30 righteous people. When he started praying for this process, what he was saying was, if there's a spark of goodness within them, that spark should be allowed to flourish and fix the place up. If there's goodness in a person, you want that goodness to be able to go and to shine and to fix them up. And this goodness in a nation, you want it to fix and rise itself up. And that's what he's praying for. When God told him, Avram, there's so little good in there. It's so you can't even see it. There is a little bit buried in there, and the mystical writings talk about it, because really we know that David comes from Lot's daughters who are in Sodom. So there was some goodness that was hidden there, and God did bring out the goodness, but you couldn't see it. And the Sodoms were so evil that God said no. But Abraham's perspective was not he wanted evil to persist. He was saying, was there goodness? And if there's goodness, then let the goodness shine out to bring it out, which is the same thing over here. I don't know what the story is in Gaza, if there are innocent civilians. I don't really know. What people say innocent civilians is not necessarily so simple, because a person says that they support the terrorists and they were cheering when they were raping and pillaging, so they're no longer innocent. But assuming there are some, then what happens is, you have some confused Jews who from a good place of wanting to help the underdog, wanting to find the good, say, okay, we got to help them. And they're wrong, but it's because they don't have the Torah to know the boundaries of how to have proper compassion. It's the craziest thing. The world is yelling at Israel for defending itself. The same lesson of Abraham, who's the only person who would ever dream of praying for Sodom, is the Jewish lesson. It's just that when you have Torah, you say, okay, well, what do I need to do now? What is the law to apply to this case? When you don't have Torah and you have a Jew that once has a good heart, he's a bleeding heart liberal, he wants to do good, he thinks, but he doesn't understand the right thing. And the right thing that has to happen right now, as I said to you, I want to tell you a very, very important piece here. And I think this is where it's going. The right thing that has to happen, as I said, the deeper things, Jews have to keep the Torah mitzvot. And that's what's happening in our neighborhood, and the whole world. The Jewish world, is strengthening, is praying, is doing the Torah stronger, which is that's what it says, Akol Kol Yaakov, the voice, when Isaac gave the blessing to Jacob, he said, Akol Kol Yaakov V'dai B'nei Esav. He didn't know who it was. He says, the voice sounds like Jacob, and the hands feel like Esau, because he put the skins on his hands. But what does it mean? The deeper meaning is that Esau fights. He makes rules of war. The Jewish people use their voice, the voice of Jacob, to pray, to learn Torah, and that's what's happening here. That's the root of it. In addition to that, the idea of fighting the enemy right now properly is very important for the Jews. And what's happening in Israel is the first time that we're seeing this, that the far left, because you should know, the people that were killed in that area of the Gaza Strip there, those were strong left-wing communities. It's the craziest thing. Those were the people that were like supporting, who were taking this very, very counter concept to what was good for the Jewish people. They were supporting, they were saying, oh, help the God. It was amazing. There were a couple religious places along the, towns along the way. But, in religious towns, in small settlement towns, so what happens is there's a gate on Shabbat, because they don't drive on Shabbat. So what happened was the terrorists first got to the religious settlements and they didn't go in because there was a gate there. They said, it's not worth the effort. Let's go to the other place. The people that they killed were the people that were their supporters. And that shook up the Israeli non-religious to realize, wait a minute, we have to recognize this is our land. And if you invite a person to your house, he comes into your house, he throws the garbage on the floor, you say to him, okay, listen, I welcome you to my house. Can you please just pick up the mess you have, And then the guy takes over half of your house. And he starts trying to throw you out of your house. When is the point you say, excuse me, sir, I let you in now. I'm throwing you out of here. So the Jews have to also, on a political level, but I don't mean political because I mean political is a spiritual root. They have to say, and this is even what the left wingers are starting to realize, this is our land. It is our land, and we need to protect ourselves. And yes, we want to. If anyone is innocent, we don't want them to have to suffer. But unfortunately, that's the terrible tragedy of war when they start to wage a war. And if you go and you start to worry about what you're doing in the war, you're endangering your own people. That's not the right way to do this. And therefore, what's happening right now, ladies and gentlemen, is God willing, we're going to see miracles and miracles and miracles leading up to the next few months. I try not to listen to the news too much because I don't want their perspective of it, because their perspective is, we got a problem. We are surrounded by hostile enemies who I think finally the Israeli left wing has said, when they said they want to kill us, they weren't joking. They actually meant it. Good morning. I mean, what did you think? But okay, took them a while to get it. But what happens is that people are starting to wake up. And God willing, we understand that that is to move the Jewish people to be closer to Hashem. And that is what's happening. Jewish people's hearts are softened, they're moving closer to Hashem. And when that happens, that brings the tremendous compassion, and that's the miracles that we're going to see. And for all of you out there, be thankful, because I think probably everyone on this discussion, and hopefully all you those who you see it, will then make sure that you are on the right side of goodness. Because if you feel yourself on the other side, nah, they shouldn't do that, they shouldn't do that, I'm not going to try to argue with you because it's too obvious. And I know deep down that's a sign that the person is just a fighter of Abraham and doesn't want the spiritual revolution of goodness that Abraham brought into the world, and that his children were commanded to bring further into the world and bring the message of Hashem, his Torah, goodness and righteousness into the world. And those who are part of that will be part of that. And those who are against it, you can't convince them, because it's just that's it's not a logic question. That is what they stand for. And be very, very thankful to God that your portion should be in the portion of the people who are amongst the righteous of the nations, and the Jewish people should do their mission. And when that happens, we're all going to see miracles, and the land of Israel will be settled again. And Mashiach will come, be a time where we'll have clarity and revelation, and all of the craziness and the lies that have filled this world will disappear like smoke, because the truth will fill the land, as it says in the verse. The truth will, the knowledge of God will fill the world like the waters fill the sea. All right, any questions, ideas, and comments? Did I knock you all out, or I put you to sleep? What happened here?
I have a quick comment for you. There's many of us, in America, and I'm sure abroad, are 100%, with you guys, not only in ideology and in Torah, but also in our prayers for you guys. But one thing that's important for us is to find ways to actively support the Jewish community. So I've reached out to a couple different rabbis and have gotten some feedback about like verifiable charities that we can be sure of, because you guys, like people like you, tell us, go here, go there, help this organization. So
right.
if you could, like, I know Kalel Chabad is a really good one. Could you recommend any more that could, specifically ones that help the children of people who have died in the massacres, or widows and orphans for them, or like the soldier families of soldiers? That'd be good for us to know.
I'll try to do a little research and send to Rod some of the names, and he can share with you guys. Yeah, I think it's a good idea. It's a good idea. It should be the right charity, and you do need always, with the charity, you should get rabbinic clarification. I'm not accusing anyone, but I say there are places that I don't want to give to a charity that has pays 30% to a fundraiser.
Right.
He's making a living also, but I'm not interested in doing that. You want to go to what you want to go to. I'm not saying that people do that, but I'm saying, but obviously there are better charities and ones that are Torah based, and there are ones that aren't. So I'll try to get some names for you, and I'll share with you to share with Rod. Yeah. Okay. Good point, David. Yeah.
What do you think about, I have a multitude of counselors that I listen to, right? I have different rabbis I listen to, and you're one of them, and one of the things I've heard one rabbi say is that he believes a lot of this happens is because of a similar baseless hatred within Jew brother for brother that was similar to the times of the Second Temple. Can you comment on that at all?
Yeah, I said that in the first class I gave on this.
Okay.
That to me is clear. That was the turning point. Because every parent knows that they want, the biggest joy they have is when their kids are all getting along. When the kids are fighting, they don't like that. And what happened was, this actually happened in Israel, is that there's a great divide in Israel amongst the religious and the non-religious. And that's what you were hearing, and you were probably hearing, it was so watered down. There was some news outlets in America that I used to like, and I saw some things that were a little funny, and then I heard their versions of news about Israel, and I realized these guys are problematic. So they had the whole thing about the what is it called? The Supreme Court business, the protests in Israel. I don't know if you heard about that. I imagine you did. It was called it was called already. But what happened was there was a law passed, a government law they wanted to have to limit the power of the Supreme Court of Israel, which the non-religious Israelis started to say that's a move by the religious to coerce us into religious things. Because the good news is that Israel is becoming a more and more religious society. And that's part of the plan. That is happening. It is happening. It's clearly happening in Israel, which is great. But it makes that sometimes the people who have trouble accepting that, they dig their heels in. So what happened was the election now put a lot of more religious people in the government. And so why do they want to limit the Supreme Court power? It was not to be anti-democratic. It was actually the opposite. What happens is that Israel has no constitution. So when the Supreme Court would make a law of reasonableness, they're what they call reasonable, it's based on their logic, because they don't have a constitution. So their logic would go against what's Jewish law. And there were cases right now of infighting in the Jewish people. And part of that was some anti-religious movements that people were saying, in Jewish law, when we go to pray, we separate the men and the women. And that is Jewish law. And the Supreme Court started to get involved in that. What? You're going to tell me your reasonableness that you think that's not okay when that is Jewish law for thousands of years? That was happening. So there was starting to get this tension. Now, what happened was when this war started, that got rid of all of that. And what's happened is there's a unifying of the Jewish people. Because secular people, what happened was they, like I saw, there was a clip that a friend of mine was telling me about where the people who were in these settlements that were near Gaza, who were themselves strong left-wing people, anti-religious people, they had to get moved out of that area. They got moved out for the Shabbat. And so religious people came to help them make a Shabbat experience. It's the first Shabbat they had. And all of a sudden they were like, wow, these people are here. And they're here to help us. And they saw the religious people coming, and they were visiting the sick, and they were helping to comfort the mourners of people who died. And the whole thing of Zaka, my wife says, is a good place to donate to. Zaka is an organization that when there's a terrorist attack, they go and they actually and gather the limbs of the people that were killed and bring them to burial. And they take the blood that's been smeared, and they gather it together. And it's something that most people can't handle. And it's all religious people that do it. So secular started seeing that. So what's happened is that that's created the process of the unifying of Israel. And that we know is what happens when there is a break in amongst the Jewish people. So God brings them together. And sometimes it's through difficult times. And that unity is one of the powers that's going to now be the thing that God pushes upon the Jewish people. What's going to bring miracles that are going to happen, because because they are unifying now. And beforehand, when their enemies were like quiet, they didn't realize it. They started getting into other, silliness of separation. Now we're more unified, and that is the proper steps to bring out the revelation of truth in the world.
Awesome.
Did I
So-
answer your question?
Yeah, that was great. And just to kind of add on that very quickly, what's the best way we can pray for the unity of Israel so that the baseless hatred is extinguished and the unity that like Psalm 133 talks about? What's the best way to pray
Yeah.
for that?
Just say like that. It's like that. We want the Jewish people to do their mission in the world, which comes through unity and the keeping of Torah. Yeah, that's what it does, and it's all it's all hand in hand. As the Jewish people become unite, as they keep the Torah mitzvahs, which is happening. I'm telling you, it's amazing in Israel, because you have to understand something. I don't know that this is clear to everybody, so let me just share this with you. Understand this. The Jewish people, Abraham is almost 4,000 years ago, right? Almost 4,000 years ago. It's more than 4,000. Yeah, it's more than 4,000. 19, no, so it's a little less than 4,000. Almost 4,000 years from Abraham. Now, if you go back 5 generations of Jewish people from today, so say 5 generations, what? That's, I don't know, 200 years, let's say. Like 200 years or so, you will find that every single Jew was keeping the Torah for thousands of years. I know it sounds crazy, because you see all these Jews today, and that is part of the process before the Mashiach comes. That's why the Holocaust, what it did was it shattered things in the world, and many Jews fell out in different ways. And the Holocaust partially was a result of the Jews that were already becoming assimilated into the non-Jewish society. And what happened was that this whole process was a process where for thousands of years, all Jews were observant, because there was no such thing as a non-observant Jew. That starts in the 1850s. In the 1850s, the Reform movement starts in Germany, which is not an accident. And the Reform movement was saying, okay, why are the Jews persecuted? We need to go, and if we act like the nations of the world, then they won't kill us and hate us so much. And that began a process of Jews doing this. But, yes, there were different times. There was the time of the Sadducees, where there was a break-off group, but those disappeared. The time of the Karaites, those disappeared too. And the Jews kept the Torah. The past few generations is where you had this process of Jews becoming alienated from their Judaism. Now, in 1960s, the process changed, and I largely believe that a lot of the hippie movement was really to actually start this process. Because what happened was we had these assimilated Jews who started looking for things, and they started returning to Judaism in a massive way. And that's happened from after the Holocaust, from the 60s, and that increases all the time. And it's happening in Israel. So you're going to have a phenomenon in a hopefully very short time, where all Jews again will be observant. Some of it is a little harsh, because what happens is, unfortunately, the Jews who don't keep the Torah, unfortunately, assimilate at a very high rate, and therefore they lose their Judaism. That's the harshest thing for us to lose, is the Jews who don't keep the Torah, because then at a certain point they'll be lost. And that's very difficult. What God does, I can't know what God does, but I'm saying there are verses that say that God will then take out one person from a family, And I've seen many families where the family became assimilated and one person came out and he then becomes observant and he has many kids and should I say? My wife is waving. She's one of those people. You know, her family basically became assimilated, and you know, thank God we have many children and grandchildren who are observant Jews. So, but you know, but that's why I went. That's why I came to America in the first place, was because the ability to save Jews who are assimilating is a short window of time. It's a short window of time. You're going to have a phenomenon in a few years where American Jewry will either be Jewish or Jews who are actually not Jewish who think they're Jewish. It's a very short window. I don't know how many years, but the demographic calculation is so what's happening is, so that's the hard part about it, is that some people who don't wake up, they lose their Judaism, unfortunately, and God will find a way to save their family and bring someone back. But on the whole, the Jewish people are becoming observant. When they become observant, then that does lead to unifying. Why? Because when you all realize you are the children of one Father, then you start to love each other because you're all made in the divine image, and that's what's happening. It's, you know, there's so much kindness here in Israel. I can't even explain it to you because you'd freak out. I used to live in a neighborhood. I mean, I'm another neighborhood now. It's very, very nice. Also, I used to live in Har Nof. It was a neighborhood in Jerusalem. There was a phone directory for the neighborhood. I would say it was probably about a quarter of maybe even a half of the directory. The first half of the directory almost was all what's called gemachs. A gemach in Israel means a charity structure, not just money. This guy sets up whoever is getting married, wedding gowns. You need a free wedding gown, you come, he bought, 30 wedding gowns and he gives them out. And this other guy has for people who gave birth and they give them baby things and this thing and that thing. It was half of the directory. Half of the directory. It was amazing. It was unbelievable. So that's the way it works here. It's like, it's a crazy thing, but like, people, I can't tell you everyone who learns Torah and supposedly keeps the mitzvot, are all righteous, because there's sometimes that people do things and they are not. They have an external, but they're not really keeping it internally. But on the whole, amongst the religious community, there's really no crime. Like, I hate to say, because I don't want to, but the only reason you lock your door in our neighborhood is because the Arabs come around here. Everyone in our neighborhood, we trust fully. I mean, they keep the Torah, and no one's ever worried they're going to come and steal from you. It's like, I mean, maybe some crazy person, but it's a minuscule number, because you're keeping the Torah. So the unity is a product of the Jews coming back to Torah. That's going to bring the unity, and that's the good news, ladies and gentlemen. Good for you, not good for the people who are against Abraham. It's very bad news for them. Very bad news for them that the Jews are more and more returning to the Torah, and the time is running out, because we know it's a 6,000-year time limit till the Mashiach comes. We know there's a 40-year minimum according to most opinions. Some opinions there's more than that. We're in the year 5,784. Okay, subtract 40. We're close. That's the minimum. Okay, some people hold it's over 100 years. So it's we don't know, but we know Mashiach is coming soon. Could Mashiach come very soon now? Yes. We say come every day, because it can come every day. The signs that are happening right now are very much in line. I don't want to say yes because I don't know when. And we just hope that the process will not be too difficult, because we know the discussion of wars that precede the coming of the Mashiach. And we're already experiencing some of that. And and if this does unravel and becomes that global phenomenon, the good news is it's not unraveling. It's all being directed exactly where it has to be. And that's why the main thing I have some of my people from my community here on the online I see, and a lot of people have asked me about coming to Israel right now. And yeah. I mean, if somebody's afraid, I'm not going to tell them they have to come, but I think that this is a good time to have trust in Hashem that if the missile has an address, and God willing, it's not to any of us, and God has an exact plan, and it's going to play out exactly right. And even though it's scary, there's no reason to be afraid. It's normal. It's normal. I mean, we got sirens going on here, it's like crazy. Cheyenne, I will make sure you cross the finish line. Okay? Beli Neder, I will make sure you cross the finish line, okay? Okay, just be in touch, and I will make sure. Yeah, I'll talk to the base in there. So just be in touch. We'll make sure, God willing. Yeah, Hashem runs the world. Everyone's heart is all open to Hashem, and nothing is there's nothing ever unfair. Just that we don't realize that. It's like when you're kids, it's unfair. No, you're a kid, we don't understand. Nothing's unfair. Hashem rewards everyone. And the Medrash says whether a person is Jewish, not Jewish, male, female, there is no biases. Everything goes by where your heart is. And Hashem brings everything to where it has to be. No one's going to be caught where they're not. And that's really what's happening right now, by the way. So I said to you, that I'm telling you right now, I just got to fix this picture behind me because it's not straight. Hope you don't mind. A little bit of a perfectionist in these things. They're like, it's not straight. It's bothering me. Okay. My wife's laughing. She knows I like certain things in the right way. Still not straight. Okay. So what I was telling you here, this is a very, very deep thing. This is in our school that we started. We have a school learning the mystical wisdoms, Torah, Kabbalah. We've been learning in our Beit Shemesh of a new study group that we learn together with rabbis, and so we learn a spiritual process called birur. Birur is like separating things. Because the problem is that the world's mixed up. Tree of knowledge of good and evil, and things are mixed up. Is this guy a good guy or a bad guy? I don't know. He's protesting for peace and love. I don't know. Sounds good to me. And you don't know. And people don't even know themselves. But what's happening now is really the process. That's what I was trying to tell you today. The person who before didn't know and said, I don't know. I don't know anything about politics, and I don't really understand. And I heard that the Jews took the land. I didn't really know they were there for thousands of years. Okay, so you living under a rock. You never read a book, but okay, you don't know. Fine. But then when you realize the most obvious thing, this killing of over 1,400 people in the most brutal way, the rapes and the murders and all the things they did. This had nothing to do with land. They were given the land. They didn't do this they wanted. It wasn't that. Oh, what they wanted was to destroy? from the sea to the river to the sea, they want to kill every Jew. Okay, so that's what what it is. So what Hamas has clearly said to everyone is nothing to do with land. Get it out of your head. I give you land and I try to share it with you. We'll be able to be in peace. That was a fake from the beginning. From 1947, they had half the land. They declared war. So people are still deluding themselves. A two-state solution. Come on. I know President Biden. I mean, I'm a little amazed that President Biden has taken somewhat a positive stand, even though it's not making sense. He has to go to his base, and his base now are radical leftists. So but two-state solution. What two-state solution? You tried that. This result was let's kill them. Now you gave them the land, and now so what happens is that at a certain point, a person realizes, oh, so the statement was, we don't want land, we don't want peace, we want to kill every Jew. Okay, just say it. Okay, I know what you want now. So when you wave the Palestinian flag and you line up with them, so that's what you're lining up with. The separation has happened. What team are you on? And that's why I see some of my people here who I've spoken to, and they're like, they can't believe that the people they know are saying things. And I'm like, you could try to say anything, but the separation has happened. It's all becoming clear. When they said that the Hamas announced to the world, it's nothing to do with land, nothing to do with peace, nothing to do with anything. It has to do with one thing: want to kill every Jew, get rid of them. Okay. Now, I'm sorry that bothers you that we don't agree to that, but we don't. And those who do. And now we know where you are. You are one of the people that would have tried to kill Abraham. That's who you are. That's who you are. You're Nimrod. You're one of those people, and you weren't one of the people that Abraham brought into his revolution of God. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, Dershowitz is, he's trying to figure it out and to explain it. Yeah, the facts are really easy. I mean, especially this one. This one's so easy. This one's a no-brainer. This was like when we pulled out of Gaza, it was a disaster. People were very upset. It was the time where you should know, in history, there were different movements. The Jews were always planning to come back to the land of Israel. There was always a Jewish presence here. In the 1800s, the lovers of Zion, the Chovei Tzion, were pushing more and more Jews to come to the land of Israel. And it was a rabbinic group. It got hijacked by modern Zionism of Theodor Herzl in the early 1900s, who was not a religious Jew, and Theodor Herzl had a philosophy, which is actually, there's very few philosophies that have ever been disproven this quickly. Theodor Herzl, his philosophy, I mean, Karl Marx was a little bit disproven, but you still have Bernie Sanders screaming it and everyone else. Theodor Herzl's idea was like, why do they hate the Jews? It's because they don't have their own land. If we had their own land, then everyone will stop hating the Jews. Well, that didn't work. What an absurd thing. Now we hate you because you have your own land. I mean, it's a joke. So what happened was the rabbis had a question how to deal with the secular rise of the Zionist movement. There were two schools of thinking. There was one school that said, no, we're not going to be part of it. Okay? And amongst that, there was two different groups also, a few different groups. And there was one group called the Mizrahi who said, listen, we got to work with them. The Mizrahi rabbis were the rabbis of what's called in Israel, the modern Zionist, the religious Zionist movement. Very beautiful, the best soldiers in the world, soldiers who fight for the truth, and that's what they fight for. And these are holy soldiers. And they're part of what's called the modern, the religious Zionist movement. 20 years ago, when they were kicking the Jews out of Gaza. The government was. The first time the rabbis from that movement who were working with government said, you need to not listen to the government's rule here. It was amazing. They said, Sarev Pikuda. No, you're in the army. You cannot kick the Jews out of their land. They're living in Gaza. We've lived in Gaza for thousands of years. Look in the book of Joshua. It's part of the inheritance of Judah, the tribe of Judah. And they said, you can't kick them out. And it was a big problem. And some army people said, I'm not kicking out Jews. And they had a whole thing what they were doing. And that plays, when we gave it to them, that is what they've spent the past 25 years creating a base to kill the Jews instead of building up a most beautiful land. So it's over now. Now, wherever your heart is, it's going to be revealed. So those who support the Jews, those who are converting, those who are righteous Noachites, and those who are the enemies of Abraham and the God revolution, all the cards on the table. There's no place else to hide. There's no,
Rabbi, as a conclusion, I would like to add something that has been a constant mantra in our community for several weeks since October the 7th, and that is, one of the major factors that we as the people of the nations can contribute is doubling down our intensities for self-improvement and the study of Torah and Musar. We need to do that and encourage other people maybe that are not particularly religious per se, but to begin to connect to understanding and truth. And we can really fan the flames of that in our society.
Yeah, I think that look, I think that righteous Noachites, to the degree that you could affect your society, is crucial. America's in a lot of trouble. It's in a lot of trouble. I mean, I expected people to turn against the Jews after a few days, but the same day, that's a new level. It's a new level. So to whatever degree, you're being able to grow in keeping the mitzvot, the 7 mitzvahs, and all the mitzvahs that are relevant, and to the degree that you can help others to do that, it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. It's a process, and the crucial thing is obviously to really connect to the Jewish mission, because if somebody is a righteous Noachide, they want to be sure that they are connected to the process.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to try to make some calls. I haven't done it because of the war now, but we still hope to come there in January and visit people in Texas and do some events.